Long before the first written word was carved into stone, long before kings were crowned and empires named, there existed a world that modern history refuses to remember. A world whose cities were not primitive clusters of huts, but vast centers of knowledge, engineering, and cosmic understanding. A world that did not rise slowly from the mud, but appeared, suddenly, mysteriously, already advanced, already organized, already aware of forces far beyond what our textbooks allow. Every ancient culture, separated by oceans and millennia, tells the same story in different tongues. They speak of a forgotten age, an era before catastrophe, when humanity lived closer to the gods, or perhaps alongside them. The Sumerians called it the time of the Apkallu, divine beings who descended from the heavens to teach civilization. The Egyptians remembered Zep-Tepi, the first time when gods ruled directly over earth. The Greeks whispered of Atlantis, a vast and powerful civilization swallowed by the sea in a single night of fire and flood. In India, ancient Sanskrit texts describe entire worlds destroyed and reborn through cycles of cosmic destruction. These stories were long dismissed as myth until archaeology began uncovering ruins that did not fit the official timeline. Massive stone structures carved with impossible precision, monuments aligned perfectly with celestial events thousands of years before modern astronomy, cities buried beneath oceans, deserts, and jungles, as if the planet itself had attempted to erase them. Göbekli Tepe, older than agriculture. Yanaguni, submerged beneath the sea. Baalbek, with stones so large modern cranes struggle to lift them. Pumapunku, where stone blocks interlock with machine-like accuracy. These are not anomalies, they are fragments of a lost chapter. What if human history is not a straight line of progress, but a cycle of rise, collapse, and forgetting? What if our civilization is not the first advanced one, but merely the latest survivor of repeated global resets? Geological evidence confirms that Earth has experienced sudden, catastrophic events capable of wiping out entire civilizations. Massive floods, rapid climate shifts, meteor impacts, solar events. Events so devastating that memory itself could be erased, leaving behind only broken stone and distorted legends. And yet, despite the scale of destruction required, something survived. Knowledge survived, encoded in myths, symbols, sacred geometry, and monumental architecture, passed down not through books, but through stone, stars, and story, a warning from the past, carved into the earth itself. This documentary is not about fantasy, it is about evidence hidden in plain sight, about a civilization or civilizations that existed before recorded history, possessed advanced knowledge, and vanished in a global catastrophe that reshaped the world. We begin where memory ends.
If early humans were primitive hunter-gatherers struggling merely to survive, then the ancient world should reflect that simplicity. But the stones tell a different story, one of extraordinary intelligence, precision, and foresight. Across every continent, we find megalithic structures whose construction defies conventional explanation. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not merely a tomb, it is a mathematical monument. Its dimensions encode pi, phi, and the exact measurements of Earth's circumference. Its alignment to true north is more accurate than most modern buildings, achieved without compasses, satellites, or lasers. Even today, engineers debate how such precision was possible using only copper tools and rope. But Egypt is only one chapter. In South America, the stones of Sacsayhuaman fit together so perfectly that a blade cannot slide between them. At Pumapunku, massive blocks were carved with internal angles and drilled holes that resemble modern machining. These stones are not roughly shaped, they are engineered. In Europe, Stonehenge stands aligned with solstices and eclipses, forming a massive astronomical calendar. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat mirrors the constellation of Draco. In Mesoamerica, the Maya tracked Venus with such precision that modern astronomers still reference their calculations. Separated by oceans, these cultures shared the same obsession, the sky. They built not only to honor gods, but to track cosmic cycles, precession of the equinoxes, planetary movements, and celestial events that repeat over tens of thousands of years.
This level of knowledge suggests generations of observation, careful record-keeping, and an understanding of astronomy that rivals early modern science. And yet, according to mainstream history, these achievements emerged suddenly, without developmental stages. Civilization appears in the archaeological record fully formed. No gradual progression, no experimental failures, no half-built pyramids. Instead, we find perfection at the beginning and decline afterward. The oldest structures are often the most precise. The later ones attempt to imitate them, but fail. This inversion of progress raises a dangerous question. What if the builders were inheritors of a much older tradition? What if they were survivors, rebuilding fragments of a lost world using knowledge preserved from before a catastrophe? Ancient texts repeatedly reference teachers who arrived after disasters to re-civilize humanity. The Viracocha of the Andes, the Quetzalcoatl of Mesoamerica, the Onians of Sumer. Beings described not as gods in the modern sense, but as bringers of knowledge, architecture, astronomy, agriculture, law. Whether symbolic or literal, the pattern is clear. Civilization did not originate, it was restored. The stones are not silent. They are speaking across millennia, telling us that humanity once understood the universe far better than we are taught to believe. And that understanding was nearly erased.
Every ancient civilization, no matter how distant or isolated, preserves a memory of one overwhelming disaster, a great flood. This is not metaphor. This is not coincidence. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible's Book of Genesis, from the Hindi Matsya Purana to the flood myths of indigenous Americans, the narrative remains eerily consistent. The world becomes corrupt or unstable. The gods, or nature itself, unleash a catastrophe. Water rises. Civilization is destroyed. A few survive. Humanity begins again. For centuries, scholars dismissed these stories as allegory, but geology tells another story. At the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,800 years ago, Earth experienced a period of extreme instability. Massive ice sheets melted rapidly. Sea levels rose over 120 meters, swallowing coastlines and entire landmasses. Once thriving settlements were submerged beneath oceans. What were once plains became seas. What were once cities became legends. Even more unsettling is evidence of sudden trauma. The Younger Dryas event, a mysterious return to near Ice Age conditions, occurred abruptly, possibly triggered by a cosmic impact. Meltwater floods reshaped continents, mega tsunamis scoured coastlines, fires raged across the planet. If an advanced civilization had existed along coastlines, as civilizations always do, it would have been obliterated. No slow decline, no chance to rebuild, just annihilation. What survived were fragments, inland ruins, oral traditions, sacred knowledge encoded in myth. Survivors passed down warnings in the only way they could, through story, symbol, and stone. This explains why ancient cultures revered water as both life-giver and destroyer, why temples were built to appease forces beyond human control, why cycles of destruction and rebirth dominate ancient cosmology. We are not the first civilization to fear the end. We are simply the latest to forget the beginning. And as the evidence mounts, one terrifying possibility emerges. The catastrophe that ended the ancient world may not have been unique. It may be cyclical.
When the waters finally receded and the skies cleared, the world that emerged was unrecognizable. Coastlines had shifted, mountains were scarred, forests lay buried beneath layers of sediment. Entire continents had vanished beneath the sea. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction, not as a species beginning, but as a civilization ending. Yet extinction was not absolute. Across ancient traditions, there is always a small group who survive. They are never described as ordinary people. They are chosen, warned, prepared. In Mesopotamia, Utnapishtim is instructed to preserve life and knowledge. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah safeguards not only animals, but the continuity of humanity itself. In India, Manu is guided by a divine being to escape the flood and later becomes the progenitor of a renewed world. In Mesoamerica, survivors retreat into caves and highlands, returning generations later to rebuild. These figures are not isolated myths. They represent a universal memory that something and someone endured. Archaeology supports this idea in unexpected ways. After catastrophic climate events, we observe not a gradual rediscovery of basic survival skills, but the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge. Agriculture emerges rapidly. Architecture becomes monumental almost immediately. Astronomy, mathematics, and symbolic systems appear with startling sophistication. This suggests inheritance. Knowledge carried across the abyss of catastrophe by a small group who remembered the old world. These survivors became teachers, lawgivers, and builders in a new age. They encoded what they knew in durable forms: stone alignments, sacred geometry, myths designed to survive illiteracy. They understood something we have forgotten. Memory is fragile, but symbols endure. Thus, civilization did not restart from zero, it rebooted from fragments. This explains why early post-flood societies revered their founders as gods or semi-divine beings, not because they descended from the sky, but because their knowledge seemed impossibly advanced compared to a traumatized population emerging from chaos. The survivors were bridges between worlds, and through them, the old world whispered into the new.
A civilization that knows it may fall does not rely on fragile methods to preserve its knowledge. It does not trust paper, libraries, or spoken language alone. Instead, it embeds its understanding into the very fabric of the world, into geometry, into ritual, into the movements of the heavens. This is precisely what we find in ancient civilizations. Sacred geometry appears universally, long before formal mathematics. Circles, spirals, triangles, and ratios recur across cultures that supposedly had no contact. The flower of life etched into Egyptian temples appears identically in China, India, and Mesoamerica. The golden ratio governs the proportions of pyramids, temples, and even entire cities. These are not decorations, they are equations. Architecture becomes a mnemonic device. A stone monument is not just a building, it is a storage medium. It records celestial cycles, harmonic ratios, and cosmological models in physical form. Even if language is lost, the geometry remains readable to those who know how to look. Astronomy serves the same purpose. The precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble of Earth's axis over approximately 26,000 years, is encoded into mythological ages. The yugas of India, the great year of Plato, the ages of man in Greek tradition. These cycles are far too long to observe within a single lifetime. Knowledge of them requires inheritance across generations, or survival from a prior age. Stone circles, pyramids, and temples act as anchors in time, marking solstices, equinoxes, and stellar risings that repeat with cosmic precision. They allow future civilizations to resynchronize with the sky after catastrophe. In this way, ancient builders were not worshiping the stars, they were archiving time itself. This hidden continuity challenges the official narrative of history. It suggests that humanity once reached a level of understanding where survival meant planning beyond one civilization, one era, even one world. They prepared for collapse, and they left instructions behind.
What we call the first civilizations may, in truth, be the second or third attempts at rebuilding a shattered world. Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and early China do not emerge as experiments. They appear fully developed. Writing systems arrive complex. Legal codes are sophisticated. City planning is intentional. Religious cosmologies are already ancient at their inception. This is not how beginnings behave. Sumerian kingship lists stretch impossibly far into the past, with reigns lasting tens of thousands of years before the flood. Egyptian records speak of dynasties of gods ruling before human pharaohs. These were not symbolic placeholders, they were acknowledgments of a deeper antiquity.
Modern historians dismiss these timelines because they disrupt the accepted chronology. But what if they are not exaggerations? What if they are memories of a pre-flood world compressed into mythic language? The earliest civilizations consistently claim inheritance, not invention. They speak of restoring temples, not creating them, of receiving laws, not devising them, of remembering golden ages, not discovering progress. This reframing forces a radical conclusion. Civilization is older than history, and history itself may be a curated fragment, carefully trimmed to fit a narrative of linear advancement. As we move forward, the evidence grows darker, because if civilizations have risen and fallen before, then collapse is not an exception. It is the rule. And the ruins of the ancient world may not be relics of ignorance, but warnings from a forgotten future.
If a global civilization once existed, then its disappearance demands an explanation of equal magnitude. Cities do not simply vanish. Knowledge does not erase itself. Cultures do not forget overnight. Something immense, sudden, violent, and planetary must have intervened. Mainstream science offers partial answers. It speaks of climate shifts, glacial melting, sea level rise. These explanations are real, measurable, and supported by data, but they fail to account for the sheer abruptness described in ancient accounts. They do not explain why destruction appears synchronized across continents, nor why fire and flood are so often paired together in memory. Geological layers tell a troubling story. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth experienced a violent interruption, the Younger Dryas. Temperatures plunged, ice returned, megafauna vanished, vast regions burned. Nanodiamonds, created only through extreme pressure and heat, are found embedded in sediment across multiple continents. Platinum anomalies suggest extraterrestrial material. Soot layers indicate global fires. These are not slow changes. They are signatures of impact. A cosmic event, whether comet, asteroid, or fragment swarm, could explain the floods, the fires, and the sudden cooling. Such an event would devastate coastal civilizations first, precisely where advanced societies are most likely to have flourished. In a matter of hours, cities would be obliterated. In days, knowledge would drown. In years, memory would distort into myth. But there is another possibility, one more disturbing. Ancient texts repeatedly describe destruction not as accidental, but as unleashed, as if something was activated, misused, or deliberately invoked. The Mahabharata speaks of weapons brighter than the sun, producing winds and poisoned waters. Sumerian tablets describe divine conflicts that burned the land. Plato warns that Atlantis fell due to hubris, knowledge exceeding wisdom. These accounts are often dismissed as poetic exaggeration, yet they echo modern descriptions of nuclear devastation with unsettling clarity. Is it possible that the ancient world collapsed not only because of nature, but because of itself? The question lingers, unresolved, hovering between science and forbidden history. And it forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Advanced knowledge does not guarantee survival.
When archaeologists dig into the deepest layers of ancient sites, they often find something unexpected: destruction horizons, layers of ash, melted stone, broken cities sealed beneath sediment, as if time itself pressed pause. At Mohenjo-Daro, skeletons were found scattered in streets, some exhibiting signs of sudden death rather than disease or warfare. At Tal el-Hammam, near the Dead Sea, evidence suggests a high-temperature airburst, hot enough to melt brick and vaporize materials in seconds. At sites across North America and Europe, vitrified forts show stone walls fused together by extreme heat. Firestorms on this scale are not produced by normal warfare or forest fires. They are instantaneous, overwhelming. Even more perplexing are ancient ruins that appear unfinished, yet abandoned abruptly. Tools left behind, structures halted mid-construction, as if builders fled or perished without warning. Civilization frozen in its final moment. Underwater archaeology adds another layer. Sunken cities off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean show advanced planning and architecture now buried beneath rising seas. These sites predate officially recognized civilizations by thousands of years. Why were they there? And why were they lost? The uncomfortable answer is that the timeline is wrong. When evidence threatens established frameworks, it is often reclassified, minimized, or ignored. Out-of-place artifacts vanish into storage. Unexplained sites are labeled natural formations. Discoveries that challenge linear history struggle to find funding. This is not conspiracy, it is institutional inertia. History prefers simplicity, but reality is rarely simple. And the deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes that something catastrophic, sudden, and global erased a chapter of humanity that modern civilization is only beginning to rediscover.
Myths are often treated as primitive attempts to explain the world, but in truth, they may be humanity's most resilient data storage system. Stories survive where books burn, legends persist when languages die, and across these myths, one message repeats relentlessly. Civilizations fall when balance is lost. The ancients warned of arrogance, of misuse of power, of forgetting humanity's place within nature and the cosmos. The fall of Atlantis, the destruction of the antediluvian world, the cyclical yugas of creation and dissolution. These are not moral tales. They are historical memories encoded in narrative form. They are warnings. The lost civilizations did not disappear because they were weak. They disappeared because they were powerful and unprepared for the consequences of that power. This realization reframes the entire documentary. The ancient past is no longer distant. It is uncomfortably close. Their mistakes mirror our own trajectory: rapid technological advancement, environmental instability, reliance on fragile systems, and a belief in permanent progress. The ruins are not monuments to failure. They are messages sent forward in time. And now, for the first time in thousands of years, humanity stands at a point where it can finally read them. The question is no longer whether lost civilizations existed. The question is whether we will listen before history repeats itself.
Modern civilization rests on a comforting assumption that advanced technology is a recent achievement, born from industrialization, electricity, and digital computation. According to this view, anything before recorded history must have been technologically crude, yet the ancient world repeatedly contradicts this belief. Artifacts exist that cannot be comfortably explained within the technological limits assigned to their era. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Greek shipwreck, is perhaps the most famous example. Dating to over 2,000 years ago, it is a complex system of interlocking bronze gears, capable of predicting eclipses, planetary motion, and astronomical cycles with extraordinary precision. It is not a toy. It is an analog computer. And it did not exist in isolation. In Egypt, evidence suggests the use of advanced stone-cutting techniques capable of achieving tolerances far beyond what copper tools should allow. Granite, harder than steel, is shaped with a precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate without diamond-tipped equipment. Drill holes show consistent spiral patterns, indicating high-speed rotation. These are not accidents of erosion. Elsewhere, we find acoustic engineering in ancient temples, where sound frequencies resonate in controlled ways. In South America, ancient road systems span mountains and jungles with logistical efficiency unmatched until modern times. In India, ancient texts describe flying machines, complex metallurgy, and surgical procedures that would not be rediscovered for millennia. Even electricity, long believed to be a modern breakthrough, may have been known in antiquity. The so-called Baghdad battery, a clay jar containing copper and iron elements, suggests the possibility of galvanic cells capable of producing electric current. While its exact purpose remains debated, its existence challenges the assumption that ancient peoples lacked electrical knowledge. Taken individually, these artifacts are dismissed as anomalies. Taken together, they form a pattern of lost science. This does not mean the ancient world resembled our own in form. Their technology may not have been mechanical in the industrial sense. It may have been based on principles we no longer use: acoustics, resonance, natural energy fields, and material science refined through generations of observation rather than mass production. Progress, it seems, does not move in a single direction. Sometimes it vanishes.
Perhaps the most underestimated aspect of ancient civilizations is not their architecture or astronomy, but their understanding of the human body and mind. Long before modern anatomy,
Ancient cultures performed complex surgeries. Trepanation, drilling into the skull, was practiced across continents with surprisingly high survival rates. Ancient Indian texts describe cataract surgery, cesarean procedures, and anatomical knowledge that would not be matched in Europe until the Renaissance. Egyptian medical papyri outlined diagnostic techniques, pharmacology, and treatments based on empirical observation rather than superstition. But beyond physical medicine lies something even more controversial: ancient understanding of consciousness. Temples were designed not only for worship, but for altered states of awareness. Acoustic resonance, light patterns, and ritual were combined to influence perception. In places like the Great Pyramid, sound frequencies behave in ways that amplify specific vibrations. In Eleusis, initiates underwent transformative experiences that shaped Greek philosophy for centuries. These were not random rituals, they were controlled environments. The ancients explored the interface between mind, body, and environment. They understood that perception could be engineered, that consciousness itself was a technology. Modern neuroscience is only beginning to explore these ideas, yet ancient cultures treated them as foundational knowledge. Their myths speak not merely of gods, but of expanded states of being, humans capable of perceiving realities beyond ordinary senses. If this knowledge existed, why was it lost? Because it could not survive collapse. Technology built on infrastructure can be rebuilt. Technology built on training, lineage, and lived experience cannot. When the teachers died and the institutions fell, the science of consciousness dissolved into religion and myth. What remained were fragments, symbols of a deeper science we no longer fully understand.
History is not merely a record of what happened, it is a selection of what is allowed to be remembered. After every collapse, the survivors do not inherit the past equally. Knowledge fragments unevenly. Some truths vanish with their keepers, others are deliberately abandoned because they are too dangerous, too disruptive, or too difficult to reconcile with the needs of a new society struggling to survive. In the aftermath of a global catastrophe, humanity does not seek complexity, it seeks stability. Stories become simpler, myths replace data, symbols replace equations. What was once precise becomes allegorical. Over generations, memory blurs into belief. But forgetting is not always accidental. As civilizations rebuild, power structures emerge. Kings, priesthoods, and later institutions recognize that controlling the past means controlling identity. A society that believes it is young believes it is innocent. A society that believes progress is linear believes collapse is impossible. The idea of a lost, advanced world threatens this foundation. It suggests that knowledge can be lost, that civilizations can regress, that dominance over nature is temporary. Such ideas are destabilizing. They undermine authority. They challenge inevitability. Thus, inconvenient evidence is minimized. Anomalies are explained away. Discoveries that do not fit the accepted timeline are labeled fringe, misdated, or ignored. This process is subtle, gradual, and often unconscious, but its effect is profound. History becomes narrow. Entire chapters vanish, not because they are false, but because they are uncomfortable. The ancient world fades into caricature, primitive, superstitious, incomplete. The possibility that it once rivaled or surpassed modern understanding becomes unthinkable. And so humanity learns to look at ruins without seeing what they truly represent. To rediscover lost knowledge is not merely an academic exercise, it is a destabilizing act. When we uncover evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, we are not just rewriting history, we are redefining humanity's potential and its limits. We are forced to confront the possibility that intelligence does not guarantee wisdom, and that technological mastery does not ensure survival. This is why rediscovery often meets resistance, not because the evidence is weak, but because its implications are immense. If ancient civilizations collapsed after reaching advanced states, then modern civilization is not unique, it is vulnerable.
Our achievements do not place us at the pinnacle of history, but somewhere along a repeating curve. This realization challenges the myth of permanent progress. It forces us to ask whether our current trajectory, rapid innovation, environmental strain, centralized systems, is sustainable, or whether we are unknowingly replaying a script written long before us. Remembering the past becomes an act of foresight. The ancients encoded warnings into myths for a reason. They understood that raw data could be lost, but stories could survive. They hoped that one day, a future civilization would reach a point where it could finally understand them, not as fantasy, but as memory. We may be that civilization, and that realization carries responsibility, because once you understand the pattern, you can no longer claim ignorance.
Today, humanity stands at a crossroads eerily similar to those faced by the lost civilizations of the past. We possess extraordinary power. We manipulate energy, matter, and information on a planetary scale. We reshape ecosystems, alter climates, and peer into the fundamental structure of reality. Yet our systems are increasingly fragile. Our technologies are interconnected, centralized, and dependent on stability. The ancient world may have fallen in an instant. So could ours. This does not mean collapse is inevitable, but it does mean it is possible. The ruins scattered across the earth are not remnants of failure. They are reminders of consequence. They show us what happens when knowledge outpaces wisdom, when power is disconnected from balance, when civilizations forget that they are part of nature, not its masters. The final chapters of this documentary will explore what happens next, not in the past, but in the future, because the story of lost civilizations is not over. It is still being written. Human history, when viewed from a narrow window of centuries, appears chaotic and linear. Empires rise, empires fall, progress advances, knowledge accumulates. But when history is observed across deep time, across tens of thousands of years, a different pattern emerges. Civilization behaves not like a straight line, but like a wave. Ancient cultures understood this intuitively. They spoke of ages rather than eras, of cycles rather than timelines. The Hindu yugas describe repeated phases of rise, decay, collapse, and renewal. Plato referred to recurring destructions by fire and water. Mesoamerican calendars reset after vast cosmic intervals. These were not metaphors. They were attempts to describe a reality too large for ordinary chronology. Each cycle begins with inheritance. Survivors carry fragments of old knowledge into a new world. Civilization rises rapidly, fueled by memory. Structures are built, systems form, knowledge accumulates. Over time, confidence replaces humility, expansion replaces balance, power concentrates, systems grow complex and brittle. Then comes disruption. Sometimes it is environmental, sometimes astronomical, sometimes self-inflicted. But the outcome is always the same: collapse followed by forgetting. What remains are ruins and stories. Modern civilization, for all its sophistication, fits perfectly into this ancient pattern. We too are beneficiaries of inheritance, standing on knowledge accumulated over generations. We too are accelerating, and we too are testing limits we barely understand. The ancients were not warning us of apocalypse. They were warning us of inevitability, unless awareness intervenes. History repeats not because it must, but because it is forgotten.
It is easy to view the lost civilizations as victims of catastrophe, but there is another way to see them, as messengers. They knew, or at least suspected, that their world would not last. This awareness shaped how they built, how they taught, and how they remembered. They did not attempt to preserve everything. They preserved what mattered most. They left behind questions, not answers. Why else encode knowledge in myths, align monuments to stars, or embed mathematics into stone? These methods are inefficient for daily life, but perfect for surviving collapse. They ensure that only a future civilization advanced enough to ask the right questions could decode them. The ancients did not expect to be saved. They expected to be rediscovered.
Their message is not technological, it is ethical. It is about restraint, balance, and humility in the face of immense power. It is about understanding humanity's place within cycles larger than any single civilization. In this sense, the ruins are not failures, they are classrooms. And humanity is finally old enough to return to them, not as conquerors, but as students.
For the first time in history, humanity possesses both the knowledge of the past and the tools to shape the future consciously. We can see the pattern. We can measure the risks. We can recognize the warning signs. The question is no longer whether civilizations rise and fall. The question is whether awareness can alter the outcome. Breaking the cycle does not mean avoiding collapse at all costs. It means understanding that survival is not defined by permanence, but by continuity. By preserving wisdom, not just technology. By valuing memory as much as innovation. The lost civilizations are no longer silent. They speak through stone, myth, and pattern. They tell us that progress without reflection is dangerous, and that forgetting is the most catastrophic failure of all. What happens next is not written in ruins. It is written in choice.
When viewed separately, the evidence of lost civilizations can appear fragmented: isolated ruins, anomalous artifacts, myths dismissed as metaphor, geological layers misunderstood or ignored. But when these elements are placed side by side, a coherent picture begins to emerge. A picture not of random coincidence, but of continuity. Across continents, ancient cultures shared architectural principles, astronomical alignments, mathematical ratios, and cosmological myths that should not have been possible if civilization developed independently and recently. The similarities are too precise, the timing too synchronized, the knowledge too advanced. What unites them is not culture, but memory. Memory of a world before collapse, memory of catastrophic destruction, memory of knowledge once held and nearly lost. This realization transforms how we interpret history. The pyramids are no longer marvels of primitive ingenuity, they are remnants of inheritance. Myths are no longer fantasies, they are compressed histories. And the so-called Dark Ages are no longer periods of ignorance, but phases of recovery. Humanity has not been climbing endlessly upward, it has been remembering, forgetting, and remembering again. The lost civilizations are not missing from history, they are hidden within it, misunderstood, misdated, and underestimated. And now, slowly, reluctantly, the pieces are aligning. To accept the reality of lost civilizations is to accept a humbling truth. Humanity is not as young nor as unique as we like to believe. We are not standing at the summit of history. We are standing somewhere along its long, repeating path. This realization carries emotional weight. It challenges pride. It disrupts narratives of inevitability. It replaces certainty with responsibility. Because if others reached heights comparable to our own and fell, then survival is not guaranteed by intelligence alone. It must be guided by wisdom. The ancients understood this. Their monuments were not declarations of dominance, but acts of remembrance. They built for eternity, not because they believed they would last forever, but because they feared they would not. In their silence, there is compassion. They left us warnings rather than weapons, lessons rather than blueprints. They trusted that one day, a future civilization would grow capable of hearing them. That day may be now, and the weight of that realization rests not on institutions or governments, but on collective awareness, on curiosity, on the willingness to question what we think we know. Remembering the past is not about nostalgia, it is about survival.
The lost civilizations are not asking to be worshipped, they are asking to be understood. Their final message is not one of fear, but of clarity, that civilization is fragile, that knowledge must be preserved with intention, that power without balance leads to collapse, and that forgetting is the most dangerous catastrophe of all. We inherit not only their ruins, but their choice, to repeat the cycle blindly or to break it consciously. The stones have spoken, the myths have endured, the evidence is no longer silent. What happens next depends on whether we choose to listen. And remember, there is a silence that surrounds ancient ruins, a silence heavier than absence, deeper than decay. It is the silence of voices that once filled cities with laughter, debate, music, and purpose, a silence shaped not by emptiness, but by distance across time. When we walk among the remnants of lost civilizations, we are not merely observing stone. We are standing inside the aftermath of countless lives. Generations who believed their world would endure. Children who learned stories beneath stars now forgotten. Builders who placed stones with care, unaware that their work would one day outlive language itself. Ruins remind us that permanence is an illusion. No empire believed it would fall. No civilization built with the expectation of disappearance. Yet every one of them vanished, not instantly from existence, but slowly from memory. First, their systems failed. Then their knowledge fragmented. Finally, their meaning was lost. And yet, something survived. The silence itself became a message. It tells us that civilization is not measured by how loudly it declares its power, but by how long its wisdom can be heard after its voice is gone. The ancients may have lost their cities, but they succeeded in something far more difficult. They reached across time. Every stone monument, every encoded myth, every astronomical alignment is an act of defiance against forgetting. A declaration that even if the world ends, meaning does not have to vanish with it. This silence is not empty. It is waiting.
To study lost civilizations is ultimately to study ourselves. Civilization is not technology. It is not architecture. It is not power. These are expressions, not foundations. True civilization is memory shared across generations. It is the ability to learn not only from success, but from failure, to preserve lessons when convenience tempts us to forget them. The ancient world challenges our definition of advancement. It asks whether progress should be measured by speed or by endurance, by expansion or by balance, by control or by understanding. Modern humanity excels at creating, but creation without remembrance is fragile. The lost civilizations remind us that survival is not guaranteed by intelligence alone. It requires restraint, foresight, and humility, qualities rarely celebrated in eras of rapid growth. They warn us that collapse often comes not from external enemies, but from internal imbalance. To acknowledge this is uncomfortable. It strips away the illusion of exceptionalism. It places us not above history, but within it. Yet there is hope in this realization, because civilizations fall not when they are doomed, but when they stop listening. Listening to the past is not regression, it is evolution, and evolution requires memory.
One day, far in the future, someone may stand where we now stand, among the remnants of our world. They may examine broken structures, fragmented data, and incomplete stories. They may wonder who we were, what we believed, and whether we understood the consequences of our actions. What will we leave behind? Will our legacy be noise or wisdom? Consumption or continuity? Power or perspective? The lost civilizations left us questions because they understood that answers change, but questions endure. They trusted that the future would be capable of asking them again. Now, we are that future. And the responsibility has passed to us, not to rebuild their world, but to learn from it. To remember that civilization is not a destination, but a process, one that must be renewed consciously, generation after generation. The ruins are not behind us. They are ahead of us, waiting to see what we choose to become.
Modern civilization often views itself as unprecedented, unique in intelligence, capability, and destiny. We speak of a modern age as if it were immune to the forces that erased every civilization before it. Yet this belief is not strength,
It is vulnerability disguised as confidence. The lost civilizations warn us against this illusion. They too believed themselves advanced. They mastered their environment. They built monuments that dwarfed human lifespans. They understood the sky, the earth, and the rhythms of time. And yet, their cities fell silent, their knowledge fragmented, and their names faded into legend. What makes us different? Technology has changed, but human nature has not. We still centralize power. We still overextend resources. We still confuse growth with progress. We still believe collapse happens to others. Exceptionalism blinds civilizations to warning signs. It convinces societies that their moment is permanent, that their systems are too advanced to fail. History proves otherwise. The ancient world did not collapse because it was weak. It collapsed because it believed it was secure.
When civilizations collapse, most things are lost. Infrastructure fails, institutions vanish, technologies become unusable. What remains are not the tools, but the ideas that shaped them. Ethics, worldviews, relationships with nature, stories that carry meaning beyond utility. This is why myths survive longer than machines. The lost civilizations understood that survival was not about preserving comfort, but preserving wisdom. They chose stone over steel, symbols over instructions, stories over data. They prepared not for continuity of power, but continuity of understanding. In doing so, they entrusted the future with something precious, not certainty, but perspective. They left us reminders that humility outlasts dominance, and that meaning outlasts achievement. Their legacy is not what they built, but what they tried to teach. And what they tried to teach is this: civilization survives not through control, but through balance.
Every civilization reaches a moment when it must decide whether to listen to its past or repeat it. This is that moment. For the first time, humanity has access to global knowledge, ancient records, scientific insight, and planetary awareness simultaneously. We can see patterns our ancestors could not. We can measure risks they could only sense. We can choose foresight over reaction. Or we can choose denial. The lost civilizations do not demand reverence. They demand awareness. They ask us to pause, reflect, and consider the cost of forgetting. History does not punish civilizations. Civilizations punish themselves by ignoring what history is trying to teach. The choice is not between progress and regression. It is between conscious evolution and unconscious repetition.
Across 10,000 years of silence, the lost civilizations have reached us, not through words, but through alignment, through pattern, through warning etched into stone and sky. They trusted time more than memory, and patience more than preservation. They believed that one day a civilization would arise capable of understanding them, not as myth, but as message. That civilization is us. We are the answer to their question. Can humanity learn? The ruins are not asking for restoration. They are asking for recognition. They want us to see that collapse is not an ending, but a consequence, and that awareness is the only force capable of interrupting the cycle. Their world is gone. Ours is still here.
Remembering is not passive. It is an act of resistance against oblivion. To remember the lost civilizations is to reject the myth of inevitability. It is to recognize that history is shaped not only by events, but by choices. That survival is not accidental, it is intentional. The ancients remembered their past so they could survive their future. Now, the future is ours. Whether this civilization becomes another layer of ruins or a turning point in human history depends on whether we value memory as much as innovation. The stones are patient, but time is not.
When this documentary ends, the ruins will remain. They will wait, as they always have. Silent, enduring, unresolved. They do not demand belief, only attention. The lost civilizations are not gone. They are listening. And history is watching to see whether we will remember them or join them.